What inspired you to pursue art as a career, and how did your early experiences shape your lifestyle?
When I was a young child, I would spend a very large percentage of my days either in coloring books, in front of cartoons on a footstool for up to 8 or more hours a day. And oftentimes both my parents were working, and a lot of my early memories are of my two sisters and I bouncing between cartoons and coloring books and the dinner table, which we turned into an art station, and we would deliver each other mail under our chairs. We would paint and crayon each other pictures, and then you'd get a bunch of mail, and whenever you were done, everyone got to go through the mail. And that was my earliest memory.
Can you share more about your first residency?
I had a life-altering experience, and it resulted with me trading my foreign sedan, my business sedan, for a van, a Chevy van. And the only thing I really knew is that my grandmother's words, which always seemed to be few but me so meaningful as she helped raise me, Arlene Perry, one day said, you know, Kevin's my birth name, said, Kevin, why don't you just do art? You're so good at it. We have so many artists already in our family. While the whole world was telling me it felt like I needed to validate myself in some scholarly way other than that. And so that was a push and pull my entire life, but art was always the anchor there.
What led you to create the Same collection?
For me, on my path, Jean-Michel Basquiat is the greatest creator I've ever experienced. His prolificness, his command of his own path have helped me so graciously on my own. So Samo came through serendipity.
Dive a little deeper in that.
When I came home from the Disappearing Print show, which was about the life and death of the encyclopedia in America, I had 3 days for that show. Every other artist had about 6 months. And I just had an idea to cut into the book and place a copy of George Orwell's. And then I made a sculpture with electronics crawling out of it up to a bird cage, which I put my, identifications with banks. And I left the door open, though, in the cage, which represented that I liberated myself from the bondage of those types of ways. But it only came through and with that art.
How did working with the established art?
Well, and Jimmy, I was building Samo, which ultimately, when I came home from that Boston residency with Artscape in West Concord, Massachusetts, I was finding myself in the need to start to move on to bigger work. However, my right arm was actually paralyzed from overuse due to my non-scholarly training. So I was doing what's called a dry-on-dry technique with heavy body acrylics for 16 hours, 2 sessions in a row. So for 2 years, my right arm was paralyzed for the most part. I could wake it up through deep shiatsu type techniques, but it was very difficult. However, I'm grateful for the experience because it made my left hand really strong, which I didn't use a lot in my life. So I was building Samo, and I built it on the concept of attraction, not promotion. And Jimmy had been having an experience that brought him here in his life, and had seen, and curiosity brought him in to see what it was about. And he has some profound background. I mean, he's been an artist his entire life in New York City, and he's very diverse, but he's washmachineproductions.com. And so we did a show together called Unearth at Samo in West Park, Ohio.
How was studying with guiding, working with negative space?
Quite profoundly. Some of my most cherished moments, words that were reflected in our our time together that helped me to be a better man on my own path, both in and out of an artistic studio. And I have recently acquired my second Gaudi Zamir artwork, and I will hope to get as many as I can for the rest of my life. It's going to be really hard to not buy anybody else's, because his work did help expand my reality of spiritual gain and so much more. But yes, quite a lot on the spiritual level. However, there was no real teaching or requesting of any knowledge other than what we kind of just shared, having come from diverse backgrounds and diverse lineages. And so it was a very awe-inspiring experience working with Gaudi, and I look forward to he will be working in some capacity with our upcoming show called Noetic, which more to be revealed there.
Can you explain the technical or philosophical processes behind quantum?
The show I did there was about, a lot of it was about healing. It was about letting what was inside of me, that was an emotion that was in one of the 12 meridians, but lower than courage. Some might call it the 7. And so I had to move through all that, and I had the art. Since Gaudi, I was working with Gaudi at that time. He was, through, whether he understood or not, through allowing me to make the types of work I made at that show and beyond, there is a group of pieces that represents a timeline of the entire show, took me to the dualisticness of life, So there's shadow portion, and then there's, the, the ether, I guess you might call it. For me, it's more just kind of being in the present moment, and I find if I do that, everything else kind of falls in place from there. So anytime I try and question what's happening, I'm not in the present moment. So I try and stay there, and that art anchors me. Well, Stephen is from Canada originally and landed in Charleston, but first in Nashville, or I think Knoxville, Tennessee. And he taught himself how to work with wood. And his last name is Stephen Wayne, Wain. And so he started Wayne Greenwood, where he would basically just find lumber and take it all the way through the kiln process to mortise and tenon tables and beyond. And he built himself a shed, a beautiful, beautiful building, all with his own hands. And I ran the drill press, and I did finishing in exchange to be able to make my art. But he also paid me a fair wage and taught me things that I had prayed as a young boy about learning how to do. So my father was very busy helping support the family through a financial career. So woodworking and fixing cars weren't something that I was exposed to. While I would see that in the world, and anyhow, it was always great anytime I was able to work with. I've worked with a lot of tradesmen as a result of that yearning, and it has taught me many things and enriched my life in many, many ways I could never explain.
Is there a way that you can dig deep on the traditional craftsmanship?
Of the tables, yeah, mortise and tenon basically is, if you were to take a chop saw and chop off wood, except you would be left with basically a long rectangle, and then you're creating the joint on the other side, and you're gluing those pieces together. And so there's no nails or screws in the joints. It's just wood into wood with glue, basically. And it's an old way of making tables. There are a lot of practitioners in the southern part of the United States of America do. There's a lot of table makers and stuff.
What role did metaphysics play in the creative process, and how do you?
Well, a gentleman came into my life from an old hip hop group in Cleveland called the Elements. North Star, which was North Star, was what he went by, and he was a doctor of metaphysics, and he taught me a lot that helped to open up the realm of possibilities and so on and so forth. And from there, it was a lot of teaching, but he gave me my spiritual name of Phoenix Skywalker, and that's where that comes from.
How do the materials?
Well, when I went to Boston with the experiences of, watching Basquiat on, in footage, I thought he had the best angle of just humbling himself into homelessness so that he could come, as I call it, come correct, or however you want to phrase it. But for me, because I like the K sound, because I'm Kelvin, So anyhow, that speaks to me. Um, Everyone has a different path. I think we're all going anyhow. So, what was the question again?
Sure. How does the material fires work?
Yeah, so part of that quest was to just figure the unfolding of the path, working within the fold. And so ultimately what happened was I knew I wanted higher quality materials, but money was involved with each stage. So I always try to buy the best, what I can afford while I'm in whatever embryonic stage. Maybe there's 7 of them in the embryo. And by the time you get to the end, you can start to get really close to having all the things. So now I'm at oil paint. I just switched to oil paint 2 days ago, so I'll be in the oil phase now. But I will always go with Chardin Paris because the paint has it's just that also I feel like speaks to me in some kind of way that it it's an ineffable kind of thing, but it's the best paint I've ever experienced. So, and I not want to keep looking for the best paint forever for the rest of my life because there's so much else to enjoy. And also, I don't think there is.
How does your current work?
I've changed majors. I've been going to school for psychology. I've studied psychology most of my life. I feel it's a natural human instinct to want to learn about the mind. But I recently switched to art history as my major at Arizona State University. I do online courses. I love it. It's a really great program. And I started, my first was the Egyptian dynasties, the 4 dynasties. Well, 3 dynasties in a kingdom, however. But it's, those types of things. So I was in schooling doing that and getting exposed to a rich amount of like Detroit music history and visiting with people and connecting with, meeting brothers and sisters of all sorts of different families and having that important part about, for me, when I get to a space, I have a period of acclimation where I like to organize my things and settle in. I've moved quite a bit, with my Irish Welsh history of, gypsyism. And also home, I call it being home more, but, some people say home less. I say home more because home's in the body. I mean, I read it on my mother's, thing when I was a kid. Home's where the heart is, the heart's in the body. So I always just felt good about that. Still do and I always will. But ultimately, yeah, sorry.
Your work from Detroit, noetic. How do you pronounce that?
Noetic. It also is known as retroduction. It's where the aha moments arrive from, which is a big part of what my work is, the dielectric magneto-hyperboloidal conjugate geometry. It's a vortex, and it accesses what's called the Akashic records or ether quantum. There's a lot of different names for it.
What theme or emotions do you hope to invoke in your return to Neo-expressionism?
I used to attach to the emotion portion. However, my hopes for all of what I create is to just put a place where people can stand before and have their own independent experiences. Beyond that, I eliminate all concern, for I can only control what I can control, which is Kelvin. So ultimately, I believe that each sovereign being carries those universal rights within them, and so that one creates a separate path on the path with all.
What ways does your work aim to expand human consciousness?
I am a mystery unto myself, and through my work, I've only, for the most part, centrally come to truly realize that these mysteries are beyond even what my own mind can conceptualize. A mystery is limited by. For it to call it something, to have a name, is to put a structure around it, a signpost. And so I released that, and kind of like watching the unfolding of life being created around me from its purest place, which is that alternate individual. And that brings me joy. And then I go make art or whatever. But I've always enjoyed watching artists emerge.
How do you balance historical and metaphysics?
Well, my ancestral lineage is, as told to me by my mother's mother, Arlene Perry, was that there was a Canadian Mountie in our family tree who helped provide safety for our Sitting Bull. And so that story has always spoken to me in a very deep manner. And I studied Native Americans with Jim Weir, one of the world's greatest arbitrators, esquires. He's doing great. And so always young, from young, and scouts. My grandfather was a master Eagle Scout, a Scout master who taught. And so it's always been.
So how do you balance?
I seek balance through doing work in the four realms of mental, spiritual, emotional, and psychological. And so if I'm feeling off, I see which, or however many, maybe none, what work might be done to bring and restore the balance thereupon.
What are your goals for your breakout show?
I've never been a big fan of the word goals unless I was scoring them as a striker for the Cleveland Premier League team, Cleveland Internationals, led by the Nanchop brothers. However, when it comes to art, having somewhere to express myself, as I come to or release the idea of trying to ever master self, but where I can do those things is the purpose of, I feel, my design. And so I was never really, well, I used to feel like the art was out for me because it was my life force. And Jimmy Pantalone once said to me, not sharing your art is a form of selfishness. And it released me from the bondage of that belief system. And really, thank you, Jimmy Pantalone, for those words, because that changed a lot.
How do you see your style evolving in the future? Will it learn more?
As Bruce Lee would say, no way is way, no limitation is limitation. And so that resonates with me. And while I don't know what the future brings, a wise being always questions their own discernment. So I'm always open to the change.
Are there any specific historical or contemporary issues you aim to?
I used to feel as such, and some of my early works represent some of those archetypes. However, these days I'm more in a state of allowance, and it's an ever-changing, deepening, flowing river. There's lakes, there's all sorts of elements involved that sometimes these questions get to a place where you reach the ineffability of what I would refer to as the ether, or quantum, or counter space. Space, counter space.
What message would you like your audience to take away from your works?
No, I really, through these, fairly recently, that bondage also has been released. And for me, is I just hope that I'm just actually it's in maybe I don't just have an experience in front of it, and if they feel compelled to express back their experience, then of course that brings potential enrichments, but ultimately the experience can also be witnessed. To bear witness does not really require any speaking with people. So to be there in that present moment, to bear witness of them having that experience in front of the work that has done these different, served me in so many ways is, I feel at this point, the ultimate. But again, it becomes more an ineffable, like a veil, maybe. It's like yeah, a fold. They call it being in the fold. I think there's a movie about that. I gotta watch that. I've never even seen it. Anyhow, I also eat all the raisins in the cereal box, so I might be an idiot.
Can you explain the two works of art that you have on demand?
So when I was in Boston, the dinosaur comes from, I was in Boston, and I really was trying to sell some art there, and I thought if I drew a dinosaur drinking a cup of coffee in front of a fireplace, that it would sell. And that's kind of where the dinosaur came from. Plus, I always like Triceratops and you know dinosaurs, and but it's just started. It evolved to have the neo-expressionism there. So it started in one phase and represents a changing over of the styles, if you will. But I mean, I'm no style is style, so yeah. So this is the dielectric magnetohyperboloid. So this is the toroid, which gives life to everything, and this is retroduction. Here is a vortex, and inertia or 0 point is there in the middle. This is the hourglass, is the hyperboloid. It says the conjugate or the opposite geometry of the toroid. So that's electromagnetism, electromagnetic fields. And then I put the word jed in Egyptian means to speak. So because ah is the sound of creation, so they say, or I feel it is, Alleluia. It's Father, Father, amazing. Anyhow, and so uh, just that kind of stuff. So, and this is a gift I gave to my brother Adam. So, just a fun way to express. I like to see it, and this is going to be something I move into too. Actually, is this pencil on the blackboard, because I find it really meditative to swirl. Yeah. And then this is one of the new ones. This was just acquired by the lingrayson.com, www.lingrayson.com. I just acquired this. This is one of my more recent works. This is I have one more recent than this, which is also acquired by Diesel Designs. But yeah, so and then it's reversible, so it's 2-in-1. I really like to have that experience. A lot of times I won't tell people that that's kind of what you get when you buy a Kelvin. Sometimes you'll get two, and that's pretty fun. But I won't really say much about like all of it. But this part's what's going to be shown. This side actually is part of the Egyptian work. Hermes Trismegistus or Thoth, which ties in. These are cities, Esna, and Esna is a city, which I was in the Young Archaeologist program in 6th grade, so this all is part of me reconnecting with my younger self. So anyhow, so that's it. And there's one little piece down there. I guess I'll show you real quick. And it's pretty good. So this is the first. At the top words on here are Egyptian, and the bottom is the equivalent of English. So pet means sky, and I have a bird named Skyrocket. So once I learned that, in is owl. Yeah, and it's anyhow. So it's pretty funny. So now I'm in this whole thing where I'm trying to break all words down in threes and see what's, because I feel like Egyptian is original. Like this is the closest to it. Like sesh means the house scribe, and when the court's in session or we're in sessions, I just did and have fun from there. So anyhow, cool.
How do you envision your impact on the art world in the next decade?
Um, my in order to go out, I go inward for myself. So as long as I stay do walk the best path that I can from what has been taught to me by those before me, around me, that may even come after this word spoken here. And so it's more of just one step at a time, and just for today, every day. just for today. So, and I just strive to be it sounds kind of corny, but who would have thunk it? Yeah, right now my real path. I mean, I've wanted to be monk many times in my life. I almost did it, but I owed taxes, but I paid them. I paid my taxes. I'm all square. So, but that prevented me from being a monk, and that's fine. That's the way God, universe, source works, and that's beautiful. Because otherwise, it'd be really boring. So, but it's about just doing the work. My family, Timothy Klassen is a wonderful artist. He lives in Smyrna Beach, Florida, and he was trying to like climb the ladder in one way after art school, and he saw Salvador Dali in New York City, and he tried to bring up his portfolio to him, and Dali said, "No, do the work." And so when I built Samo Collective and Gallery, I used that a lot, and I talk with Timothy all the time. Timothy Klassen's one of the most beautiful men ever. He once lived with the Native Americans for 15 years. I never heard the story from him. I hope to one day, but he's a really incredible man, and that's my mother's side. That's I grew up with going there, and he would have a blue macaw, and I now have a blue macaw feather from Spirit, which goes back to my native work with Jason Rios and Ole Kava Church. So, it's like all roads lead home, like, ha ha ha. It really feels true, and it's just hilarious and beautiful and mysterious, and I'm okay with it all. But in the next 10 years, may, joy be upon the world, really. It's like, that's it. I'll do me, and I hope the world does them. And we also keep in mind that, we're all kind of in the same dream together. We're both the dream and the dreamer, they say, samadhi. So, namaste.